My name is Ivy Carrington. I'm 27 years old, and for most of my life, I was taught that beauty wasn't just important, it was everything. I was born into the Carrington family, a name that echoed through Charleston like a sweet southern hymn, graceful, elegant, pristine. Our mansion sat behind high hedges, its white columns always polished, its front garden trimmed into perfection, as if the grass itself knew it must not dare to grow wild. We had maids who whispered, guests who judged silently, and a mother who monitored reflections more than emotions. My mother, Magnolia Carrington, was the former face of the Charleston Rose Parade and the local queen of controlled smiles. My father, Sterling Carrington, a retired state senator, knew everyone who mattered and reminded us daily of our duty to uphold the Carrington legacy. And then there was Savannah, my older sister, the crown jewel, flawless, desired, celebrated. And me, I was the shadow in the photo, the girl standing just off center, the one whose face didn't quite fit the mold. When I was 17, my mother told me I had a face made for privacy. She said it at breakfast while slicing her grapefruit. There was no venom in her tone, just observation, like she was commenting on the weather. My skin was too troubled, my nose too earnest, my hair too unruly. The list went on. But I had something else, something no mirror could capture. I had curiosity, a mind that craved puzzles, systems, patterns. I spent nights writing code by candlelight, hiding under my blanket with a second-hand laptop I'd restored myself. That glow, soft and blue beneath my sheets, felt like my only freedom. I wasn't beautiful, so I became invisible. And in that invisibility, I built a world of my own. My blog, Face Forward, started as a diary, lines of code mixed with confessions. I'd write things I could never say aloud. My mother once found a draft I'd left open and deleted it without a word. The next morning, she left a pamphlet for rhinoplasty on my pillow. They didn't ask what I loved. They asked who would love me back if I looked like this. On the night of my high school graduation, as I zipped up the only dress my mother approved, a corseted blush satin that made it hard to breathe, I looked in the mirror and saw someone I didn't recognize. The girl staring back at me wore someone else's dreams, someone else's life. That night, I delivered my valedictorian speech with trembling hands, scanning the crowd not for my parents, but for the only person who ever really saw me, my computer science teacher, Mr. Heller. He nodded from the back row, eyes kind and steady. But what followed wasn't applause. It was silence, a slow, cold hush, broken by whispers and smirks. My sister laughed behind her hand. My mother didn't look up from her phone. Later, at the graduation party they hosted for Savannah's modeling contract more than my scholarship, I overheard it. My name, my photos, a shared album called The Other Carrington going around. My face, my skin, my awkward smile, all mocked, dissected, turned into memes by my sister and her friends. I locked myself in the bathroom and slid to the floor, my gown bunched beneath me. That was the first time I allowed myself to break. And in that break, something awakened. Not rage, not revenge, resolve. And that's where my story truly begins. The morning after graduation arrived like any other southern dawn, humid, golden, quiet. But for me, the silence carried a different weight. The kind that settles over a battlefield after the fighting stops, but before the dead are counted. My suitcase stood at the foot of my bed, half-zipped. Not because I was going anywhere, at least not yet, but because something inside me already knew. I couldn't stay. Downstairs, the Carrington household bustled with energy. Caterers loaded the remnants of last night's party into vans. My mother barked orders from the veranda, her voice sharp even through the thick glass windows. Savannah was already on her second mimosa, laughing at something on her phone. Probably still looking at my photos. I walked slowly to the dining room, hoping, foolishly, That maybe someone would acknowledge what happened the night before. That someone might say sorry. Instead, there was a gift box waiting for me, wrapped in white satin ribbon with a card that read to Ivy, "A new beginning." My heart beat faster. I thought, just for a second, maybe they changed. Maybe this was an apology. I opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside was a brochure. Thick, glossy, perfumed. On the cover, a woman with impossibly smooth skin smiled back at me beneath bold letters, "DR Weston Summer Sculpt Package." It wasn't an apology. It was a plan. On the kitchen island sat an envelope, my name written in my mother's script. I opened it to find a full consultation booked with Charleston's top cosmetic surgeon. A deposit already paid. Pre-surgery regimen outlined. Rhinoplasty, chin refinement, jawline contouring, optional lip augmentation. Savannah peeked in from the hallway, sipping her drink. "It's the same guy who did Brooke's nose. You'll love him." My throat tightened. I didn't ask for this. "You didn't have to," she shrugged. "You need it." I turned to my mother, who stood behind me now, arms folded. "Why would you do this?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, just sighed and sat at the table like it exhausted her to explain. "Ivy, people won't take you seriously looking like that. You're smart, yes, but the world doesn't reward smart women who look tired, or sloppy, or real." I whispered. Her gaze was hard. "Or real." She reached for my hand, and I pulled away before she could touch me. "This is your future," she said, voice low and urgent. "You're going to MIT, yes, but that's not enough. If you want to make it in tech, or anywhere, really, you'll need presence. Polish. Poise." I stared at the brochure again. The woman's face so smooth it almost looked plastic. Her smile empty. I knew then what they really wanted. Not to help me, not to support me, but to erase me, to sand away the rough edges until I fit back into their picture-perfect world. And I couldn't do it. That night, I packed the rest of my things. The laptop I saved for years to buy. My hard drive filled with lines of code and late-night thoughts. A photo of me and Mr. Heller at the science fair, one of the few pictures where I was smiling without effort. At 2 a.m., I left the house, not through the front door, but through the garden path, barefoot on the dew-soaked grass. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I left the brochure on my mother's vanity, with a ribbon still attached. Charleston streets were still, the moon watching like a quiet witness. And as I stepped onto the midnight bus to New York City with 2 suitcases and $237 in my pocket, I didn't cry. Because somewhere deep inside, I wasn't broken anymore. I was just beginning. New York didn't greet me. It didn't welcome me with open arms or even notice I had arrived. It simply existed, loud, indifferent, pulsing with 1,000 lives that had nothing to do with mine. I stepped off the bus just after sunrise, the kind of gray, steel-colored dawn only the city could make look elegant. My 2 suitcases thudded onto the pavement behind me, and I clutched my backpack tight against my chest. That backpack carried everything that mattered. My laptop, my charger, a notebook with passwords, sketches of app ideas, and a paper copy of my MIT acceptance. There was no plan, just space, and silence, and the stubborn beat of my own heart that refused to give up. The first few nights were spent in a motel that smelled like cigarette ash and Lysol. It was $25 a night, cash only, and the man at the front desk never looked up from his TV when I checked in. The sheets were thin, the walls thinner, but it was shelter, and I was grateful for it. In the mornings, I walked the city. I passed towering glass buildings, brownstones with flower boxes, street vendors selling hot bagels and burnt coffee. No one looked twice at me. No one cared about my scars, my weight, my awkward smile. I was just another girl with tired eyes and ambition stitched into her stride. For the first time, I felt invisible, and it wasn't painful. It was freedom. I printed out a dozen resumes at a library computer lab and walked into every shop and cafe I could find. I lied when I had to. Told them I had experience. Said I could start right away. Most smiled politely. Some turned me away on the spot. "Sorry, sweetheart. We need someone who won't scare customers," one manager whispered under her breath. By day 6, my money had dwindled to $73. I bought a single meal a day, a buttered roll and a cheap coffee, and rationed the rest for toiletries and bus fare. I skipped meals when I had to. I sat in public libraries until closing time, filling out job applications, coding snippets of ideas I couldn't yet afford to build. My body started to ache. My skin fled under the stress. And one night, while sitting alone in the park, I thought of calling my mother. Just once. Just to say I tried. I pulled out my phone. Her number was still saved. I stared at it until my thumb hovered over call. Then I locked the screen. I had left for a reason. On the 9th day, I got lucky. A coffee shop in Queens, the Beanery, needed a barista to cover the 6 a.m. shift. The owner, a wiry woman named Maureen, barely glanced at my resume. "Any food service experience?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, but I'm a fast learner, and I won't be late. Ever." She narrowed her eyes. "Can you lift 30 pounds? "Yes." "Can you deal with rude customers without crying?" I swallowed. "Already have." She smiled, and it wasn't unkind. "You start tomorrow. Minimum wage plus tips. Don't steal the muffins." I almost cried right there. That first paycheck covered the next week of motel rent. It bought me enough food to stop shaking when I stood. It bought me a chance to stay. At night, I added another job, data entry for a tiny insurance office uptown. Monotonous, repetitive, but it paid hourly, and no one cared what I looked like. I sat behind a screen, typing until my fingers cramped, and dreamed of building something bigger. I was surviving. Barely. But I was free. And freedom, no matter how hungry, was better than being fed lies in a mansion that never loved me. The days bled into each other, colorless and exacting. Mornings behind the espresso machine, afternoons behind a spreadsheet, nights wiping fingerprints off glass doors in office lobbies. I didn't rest. I didn't speak unless necessary. I just moved, worked, endured, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. And still, it wasn't enough. Rent, food, transit. I watched my paycheck vanish before I even touched it. I learned how to make a box of rice last 4 days. I learned which bodegas let you fill your water bottle for free. I learned that there is no silence in New York, only quieter kinds of noise. Then came the email. It arrived while I was microwaving soup in the staff kitchen at the insurance office. The subject line: MIT enrollment deferred, action required. I stayed at the screen, rereading it 3 times. The words pulsed like a wound. Due to incomplete housing documentation and missing financial confirmation, your fall enrollment has been postponed to the spring semester. I had missed the deadlines. I had been too busy staying alive. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs and throat. I pressed my fingers against my sternum, as if I could hold my body together by force alone. People walked past me in the hallway. No one noticed. I kept working. That night, the motel manager told me I had 1 hour to pay or leave. I had $32 in my pocket, and nowhere to go. So I packed my bag, left the key at the desk, and wandered into the city like a ghost unsure where she died. I spent the night in a university library that stayed open 24 hours for summer students. I told the security guard I was writing my thesis. He barely looked up. I found a couch behind the philosophy section and curled up with my backpack under my head. My body didn't rest. But at least I wasn't moving. The next morning, I brushed my teeth in a gas station bathroom and went back to work at the coffee shop. The manager frowned at my sunken eyes, the way my hands trembled as I wiped the counter. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. Lie. Everything was not good. The days that followed blurred. I worked. I ate when I could. I washed my clothes in bathroom sinks and dried them under hand dryers. I stopped looking in mirrors. Then, on the third day without sleep, my body quit. It happened during the morning shift, in front of a customer ordering a chai latte. One moment I was standing, smiling, reaching for the cup. The next, I was on the floor. When I opened my eyes, the ceiling lights felt like lightning. I heard voices above me, a phone call, the smell of sanitizer, and then a calm voice beside me. "There you are. You scared us." I turned my head. A woman in scrubs, her hair tied back in a messy bun, smiled gently. Her name tag read Janet. "You're in the hospital," she said. "You fainted. Dehydration. Malnutrition. Exhaustion. Classic New York cocktail." I blinked. My lips were too dry to form a reply. She handed me water in a paper cup. I drank it slowly, feeling it bloom like mercy in my throat. "I'm fine," I whispered. "I just need to get back to work." Janet shook her head. "No. You need to stay. Just overnight. Let your body catch up to everything you've been carrying." I didn't have the strength to argue, or run, or lie. That night, as machines beeped softly and strangers moved around me in the dark, I saw my reflection in the window. Hollow cheeks, pale lips, hair dull and matted. I had escaped the Carringtons, but I hadn't yet become someone else. I was only what remained. For the first time, I wondered if I had made a mistake. If going home, even in defeat, would be better than this quiet dying. I reached for my phone. I typed in my mother's number and hovered. One tap, one call, one surrender. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I pressed delete contact. This wasn't the end. Not yet. I would not crawl back. If I was meant to rise, it would be from this. Not by someone else's rescue, but by my own relentless will to live. Morning crept into the hospital room slowly, like it wasn't sure I deserved light. I sat propped against a pile of thin pillows, fingers curled around a paper cup of weak coffee. Every inch of my body ached, not with pain, but with the memory of holding itself up for too long. Janet returned just after sunrise, her footsteps soft, her face kind. She carried a clipboard in one hand and something else in the other, a folded flyer. "No one listed you as an emergency contact," she said gently, eyes scanning my chart. "No family, no local address. Is there someone you'd like us to call?" I shook my head. "All right," she said, as if that was all the answer she needed. "I'd like to offer something, if you're open to it." She held out the flyer. On it was a photo of a small brick apartment building and a short paragraph typed in plain font. "Room available near Central Square. Shared bathroom. Rent negotiable. Quiet household. My daughter's roommate just moved out," she explained. "It's nothing fancy, but it's clean. Safe. And cheap." I stared at the paper. Suspicious. Guarded. Silent. "Why would you help me?" I asked. Janet smiled, that weary, knowing kind of smile only people who have seen the bottom can give. "Because 20 years ago, I was you, and someone gave me a room when I had no place to go." I blinked fast, afraid tears might come if I didn't. "Come see it," she said. "If you hate it, say no. But if you don't, maybe it's a place to start over." 2 hours later, I was standing in a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. The apartment was modest, worn hardwood floors, second-hand furniture, cluttered kitchen, but it felt real. Home didn't have to be perfect, just possible. My new roommate was a girl named Alicia Chen, a computer engineering grad student with paint-splattered sweatpants and 2 pencils stuck in her messy bun. "Bathroom's over there. Kitchen's a mess. Sorry," she said without looking up from her laptop. "Rent's due the feist. Don't smoke, don't scream, don't bring weird dudes over and we'll be good." I stared at her. "You don't want references or anything?" She shrugged. "Janet vouched for you. That's good enough." She pointed to the far bedroom. "That one's yours. There's sheets in the closet. I gotta finish this back-end rewrite before I cry." That night, I slept in a real bed. Not a motel mattress. Not a library couch. Not the cold floor of a public restroom. A bed. Clean. Still. Quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't even dream. I just slept. Deeply. As if my body finally believed it would wake up safe. The next morning, Alicia was still at the kitchen table, surrounded by coffee mugs and code. "You said you code, right?" she asked without preamble. I nodded cautiously. "Python. JavaScript. Anything else?" I hesitated. "Some C++. Mostly self-taught." She looked up, eyes wide. "You're joking." "No." She spun her laptop around. "Okay. This backend is a nightmare. The loop logic is broken, the API calls are tripping over each other, and our developer just ghosted. If you can fix this, I'll pay you. Not much, but something." I sat down, opened the terminal, and after months of running, hiding, surviving, I finally returned to the only place that ever felt like mine. Code. 2 hours later, her broken backend ran smooth. Alicia stared at the screen like I had just rebuilt Rome from ashes. "Holy, where did you learn to code like this?" I shrugged. "I used to run a blog. Face forward. Just tutorials. Tips. Projects." Alicia's jaw dropped. Wait. Your Face Forward, the one with the skincare tracker and the JavaScript loop hack? That blog saved me during freshman finals." I blinked. The girl across from me didn't know my face, but she knew my work, and in her eyes, it mattered. It mattered more than cheekbones or smooth skin or anything my family ever tried to carve out of me. That night, over greasy noodles and shared silence, Alicia made me an offer. "Stay. Work with us. We're building an app for college students. Schedules. Health. Mental wellness. I know it's small, but you're brilliant. We could use you." I looked down at the takeout box in my lap, then at my fingers, then at her. "I'll do it." Not because it was safe, not because it was easy, but because someone finally looked at me and saw more than what I lacked. They saw what I was. The days that followed passed like sunrise through tall windows, slow but certain, washing my life in new color. In the morning, I still worked at the coffee shop, not because I needed it, but because I owed it to the girl who had collapsed on that tile floor, the one who didn't quit, the one who, somehow, still believed she could survive. But every other hour was poured into the app Alicia had started with her university incubator. It was called PulsePoint, a health and wellness tracker for college students, but with too many bugs and not enough structure. Within 2 weeks, I had rewritten half the backend, stabilized their cloud integration, and designed a cleaner user interface. I wasn't just a coder anymore. I was a builder. I became the person who answered Alicia's 3 a.m. Slack messages, who mapped out features with post-it notes on the fridge, who stayed up until sunrise debugging a missing semicolon. No one asked what I looked like. No one commented on my skin, my weight, or my smile. I was seen for my skill. One evening, after pushing a new build live, Alicia handed me a ginger beer from the fridge. "You ever think about making your own thing?" she asked. "Like, not working for someone else, just building something that's yours." I had. Quietly. Secretly. Like a dream you don't say out loud because the world might crush it. There was something, I murmured. I started working on it when I was younger. A skin condition tracker, AI-based. It logged flare-ups, map triggers. I never finished it. Alicia blinked. Wait, that's genius. There's nothing like that out there. I shrugged. It was more for me than anyone else. I needed control. When I couldn't fix my face, I tried to understand it. She leaned forward. You should finish it. I can help. My cousin's in dermatology. We could test it, map it, pitch it. Seriously, Ivy, this could be big. That was the first time she called me Ivy. Not with pity, not with disdain. Just like it was a name that belonged. I paused, thinking of my family, of the Carrington legacy, what that name had meant. And then I whispered, it's not really my name anymore. Alicia tilted her head. You're changing it. I nodded slowly. I'm applying to MIT again for spring. And when I do, I'm using a different name. She waited. I smiled. Harper Wilson. The name of the teacher who believed in me. The first adult who ever told me I had a future worth choosing, not worth fixing. Alicia raised her ginger beer like a toast. To Harper Wilson. To second beginnings, I said softly. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I got an email. Subject, Spring Enrollment Approval, MIT. The financial aid office had reviewed my case and extended support, emergency housing, a work-study role, and full spring enrollment. Later, I would learn that a professor named Dr. Reynolds, who had read my original application and met me briefly during the process, had stepped in. Quietly, kindly, the way good people often do when no one's looking. By the time snow began to drift into the cracks of New York sidewalks, I was no longer just surviving. I was enrolled. I had housing. I had a path forward. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged in the life I was living. Spring came, and with it, a new city, a new campus, a new rhythm. I moved into subsidized housing near the Charles River and began my coursework. Computer science, machine learning, ethics of artificial intelligence. My schedule was brutal, but I thrived in the rigor. Dr. Reynolds became my mentor, offering guidance that stretched beyond assignments. When I showed him my skin tracking app prototype, he leaned back in his chair and said, Harper, this is more than clever. It's needed. He connected me with people from the Entrepreneurship Center. People who didn't flinch when I told them I had once built code while homeless. People who didn't care that I hadn't come from the right prep school or worn the right dress at graduation. They cared about what I was building. They cared about Natural You. That's what I called it. Natural You. An app that let people track their skin patterns, discover triggers, receive data-backed suggestions. No filters, no whitening, no perfection, just understanding and ownership. A year later, Natural You had seed funding, a beta version, and a team of 5. I was the CEO of something that didn't exist in the Carrington world, an idea born from pain, not vanity. I lived in a tiny studio overlooking the river. I furnished it myself. No one critiqued my color choices. No one asked me to hide my mirror. And one quiet evening, as the app pushed its first update live, Alicia turned to me and said, You look different. I touched my cheek. The acne had faded. The swelling gone. The stress no longer painted across my skin. I guess peace looks good on me, I said. She grinned. You always looked good. You just didn't know what you looked like yet. And in that moment, I realized, maybe neither did they. The email arrived on a quiet Thursday morning, buried between a delivery confirmation and a university reminder to renew my student transit pass. Subject, Wellesley High, class of 20XX reunion. 10 years. You're invited. I stayed at the screen. Not blinking. Not breathing. For a moment, the room seemed to still around me. The hum of my laptop, the distant rumble of Cambridge traffic, the soft ticking of the wall clock, all faded. I clicked it open. It was real. A decade had passed. 10 full years since I had walked across that stage in a too-tight dress with altered seams and trembling knees. 10 years since the whispered insults, the digital humiliation, the party where I had stood like a ghost in my own house, watching strangers toast to my sister while pretending not to see me. And now, they were asking me to return. I almost deleted the email without replying. Almost. But then, the next morning, a second message arrived. From a sender I hadn't heard from since the night I walked away with nothing but 2 suitcases and my name tucked into my chest like a secret. Madison.Carrington. Subject: Please. I've been trying to reach you. I didn't open it at first. My thumb hovered. My heart beat faster than it should have. Then I tapped. The message was short. Harper, I know it's been a long time. I saw the article. I've been trying to find you. Please, we need to talk. Things have changed. I have changed. Please. No grand apology. No justification. Just the word please, repeated twice, like a crack in her voice had bled into the screen. I stayed at the words, unsure of how to feel. I remember the girl who had laughed at my photos, who had labeled me the ugliest graduate, and shared my humiliation like party favors. But time does strange things to wounds. Some scars fade, some stay tender, and some transform into something else entirely. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but clarity. That night, as I stood on the balcony of my apartment overlooking the river, I held my phone in both hands. I thought of all the lives I had built since leaving Charleston. Natural You had just reached 100,000 downloads. We had been featured in a national magazine. My face, my real face, had been on the cover. No edits, no smoothing, no filters. My name was no longer hidden behind shadows. Harper Wilson, CEO, engineer, survivor, but more than that, free. I wrote back, I'll be at the reunion. We can talk then. The weeks leading up to the event passed in a kind of slow momentum. I didn't prep like my mother would have. No crash diets, no new wardrobe, no endless hours in front of a mirror rehearsing how to appear perfect. Instead, I worked with my therapist. We prepared not for confrontation, but for control. My control. I chose my outfit with care, a custom emerald dress that hugged me without apologizing, elegant without screaming. A pair of shoes that wouldn't blister. My grandmother's pearl necklace, the one thing I had taken from that house without permission. Thomas, my partner of 3 years, offered to come with me. I don't need to face them, he said, his eyes steady. But I'll stand behind you if you want me to. I kissed him and said no. This is something I have to close on my own. Returning to Wellesley was like walking into a museum of someone else's life. The streets were cleaner than I remembered, the houses smaller. The names on plaques and street signs no longer inspired fear. Just nostalgia, trimmed and quiet. I checked into the Wellesley Grand Hotel, ironically, the same place my parents had once hosted galas for their political donors. The reunion was scheduled for the following evening. But Madison wanted to meet early. 2 p.m. at Rosewood Cafe. I arrived on time. She was already seated at a corner table, stirring a cup of tea she hadn't touched. The years had reshaped her too. The glow she once wore like armor had softened into something more fragile. Lines gathered around her mouth. Her posture was more curled than proud. When she saw me, she stood. "You look," her voice caught. "You look great." "Thank you," I said simply, and sat across from her. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. No accusations, no rehearsed speeches, just silence and breath and the fragile space between two lives that had diverged in fire. "I've been trying to find you for almost 2 years," she said. "You changed your name. It took me a while to realize who Harper Wilson was." I didn't respond. She continued, voice shaking, eyes flicking toward the window. "I read the article. About the app. About MIT. I didn't know the story was that." "What do you want, Madison?" I asked. She took a long breath, then exhaled. "To say I'm sorry. For everything. The photos. The party. Your diary. It was cruel. All of it. And I knew it, even then. But I didn't stop." She looked up. "I hated how easy it was to hurt you, because it made me feel strong. But I wasn't strong. I was scared of being second." Her hands shook slightly as she clutched her mug. "What happened after I left?" I asked. Madison looked away. Everything collapsed. Madison's fingers tightened around her mug. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she did, quietly, like the words cost her more than she had to spare. "Dad's firm fell apart. One of his partners was caught embezzling. Turns out he knew. Had known for years. They threatened to indict him, but he struck a deal before it went public. Still, the damage was done. Clients walked. Reputation ruined." I listened, unmoved, not out of cruelty, but because part of me had already let them go. "And Mom?" I asked. She nodded, eyes glassy. She spiraled. The moment the donations stopped and her name wasn't on every invitation list, she broke. She had a breakdown. Tried to hold on, but the country club dropped her. The charity board replaced her. They lost the house 2 years later. I blinked. Slowly. I should have felt something. Vindication. Relief. Justice. But there was only quiet. Not triumph. Just distance. "And you?" I asked, softer than I expected. Madison laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Not the one I remembered. This one was brittle. Sad. "I married Bradley Henderson right after college. Remember him? Brooke's brother." I nodded. "It lasted 2 years. Turns out pretty doesn't hold a marriage together. Or a job. Or anything really. After the divorce, I tried modeling again, but no one cared. I work in real estate now. Rentals mostly. Barely getting by. I rent my own apartment in the city. I shop at discount stores. No one asks for my autograph anymore." Her voice cracked at that last sentence, like she hated herself for ever expecting someone to. "I'm sorry things have been difficult," I said, and realized I meant it. Not because I forgave her, but because I understood the weight of losing everything you thought defined you. She looked at me then, really looked. "I know I don't deserve it, but I miss you. Not the rivalry, not the pressure. Just having a sister. I'm proud of who you've become, Harper, even if I was never proud of you when it mattered." There was a silence that followed, not awkward but fragile. A silence that held possibility. "I'm not promising anything," I said. "Not forgiveness. Not friendship. But I'll talk. I'll listen. I'll see what's left to build, if anything." She nodded. That was enough. That night, I stood before the entrance of Wellesley High, its gymnasium strung with cheap fairy lights and overcompensating nostalgia. The sign above the door read, "Welcome home, class of 20XX." I entered alone, and all at once the room slowed. Not because I was imagining it, but because they recognized me, the girl who had vanished. The name they now knew from headlines, from articles, from whispers passed around office break rooms and startup expos. Brooke Henderson saw me first, her hand stilled on her cocktail glass. She nudged Cassandra, and they both turned. Their faces said it all. They hadn't expected this version of me. Principal Whitman, now gray-haired and slightly stooped, approached with a warm smile. Harper Wilson, he said proudly. Our most successful alum. We've been hoping you'd come. I shook his hand, gracious but careful. It wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. As I moved through the room, people began to swarm. Classmates who never spoke to me now tried to recall some shared memory. They handed me business cards, asked for advice, suggested collaborations, told me they'd always believed in me. I smiled politely, but inside, I remembered every snicker, every whisper, every time they turned away from me like I was nothing. Only one person in that gym truly mattered to me that night. Mr. Heller. He stood near the back, same tweed jacket, older but still bright-eyed. When our eyes met, he raised his hand in a small wave. I always knew you were going to change the world, he said when I reached him. But I admit, I didn't know you'd make it look so effortless. Tears burned in my throat. I changed my name to yours, I told him. Wilson. It's legally mine now. His mouth fell open. Then he stepped forward and pulled me into a hug that held more warmth than my own parents had ever offered. I can't think of a greater legacy, he whispered. Later, just before I was about to leave, I felt a shift behind me, a presence I hadn't felt in years, like a storm in a silk suit. I turned. My parents stood just inside the gym doors. My mother's once flawless face was masked beneath layers of concealer and effort. Her smile was tight, unmoved. My father's posture had shrunk, shoulders hunched, tie slightly loose. Hop, my father said, extending a hand like we were business associates. You're looking well. Thank you, I said, shaking it briefly. It's been a long time. We've been following your success, my mother added, her voice brittle. The app, the interviews, very impressive. My father leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice as if offering a deal. I recently started a boutique firm, intellectual property law for tech startups. Perhaps we could discuss a possible collaboration. I didn't flinch, didn't scream, didn't scold. I smiled. I have excellent legal representation, but thank you for the offer. He nodded quickly, as if he hadn't expected a yes. As family, he began. We're not family, I interrupted, my voice calm, unshaken. You made that choice 10 years ago, when you gave me an ultimatum, when you decided that how I looked mattered more than who I was. You chose that. My mother's eyes welled up. We only wanted to help. No, I said, softly. You wanted me to fit, to shrink, to dissipate inside your idea of what was acceptable. But it turns out, I had to stop being a Carrington to become who I really am. She blinked fast, still trying to hold on to the image, still trying to fix what was never hers to own. You look better, she offered. Your skin, your hair, you've really improved. I laughed, not bitter, just amused. My appearance hasn't improved, I said gently. I just stopped letting you convince me it was ever a problem. And then, a hand touched my shoulder. Madison. She stepped between us, her voice soft but firm. I think we should go, she said to them. Harper has people who actually want to see her. They hesitated, then nodded. As they turned to leave, I called after her. Madison. She looked back. Coffee. Next week. Same place. Her smile was real. I'd like that. As they vanished into the crowd, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel above them. I just felt free. The night after the reunion, I stood by the hotel window, barefoot, the lights of Wellesley twinkling below me like stars that had fallen into neat suburban rows. Behind me, my dress hung over the back of a chair, my heels tucked beneath it like tired soldiers. I had said everything I needed to say. I had faced them, and now I was done. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a kind of solemn relief that seeps into your bones when you finally drop a weight you've carried for far too long. Thomas called just after midnight. "Well?" he asked, his voice soft in my ear. "Chapter closed." I smiled. "Not closed," I said. "Rewritten." A week later, I returned to Cambridge, the chill of early fall settling into the edges of the city. I resumed my schedule, lectures, meetings, app development. But something inside me had shifted. Lighter, clearer, focused. Natural You was no longer just a project. It was a platform, a movement. We launched our newest feature, a resource center for underserved communities to access affordable dermatological care. Our user base doubled in a month. I began speaking at tech conferences, universities, women in STEM panels. Each time I stepped on stage, I wore no foundation, no contouring, no smoothing filters in the slides. Just me, my face, my story. One morning, I gave a keynote at a tech conference for young girls interested in coding. They filled the auditorium in groups, some in school uniforms, some in worn sneakers and overstuffed backpacks. All of them wide-eyed, curious, waiting. And for the first time publicly, I told them the whole story. Not just the app, not just MIT, but the girl behind the code. The girl who was told she wasn't enough, who had been laughed at, rewritten, erased. I told them how I rebuilt myself, not by becoming beautiful, but by becoming real. You are not your skin, I said, not your reflection, not the numbers on a scale, not the opinions of people who refuse to see you. The room was still, and then it rose, like a wave of warmth. Madison and I met every other week for coffee. Slowly, like rebuilding a house brick by brick with trembling hands. We didn't talk about the past often. We didn't need to. We were building something new. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but something honest. My parents remained at a distance. Occasionally, my father sent emails through his assistant. Short, cold, sometimes about legal updates, sometimes about family trust matters. I responded when necessary. I didn't block him, but I didn't invite him in, either. That boundary was mine to hold now. Thomas and I moved into a modest brownstone near Kendall Square. He still kissed my forehead every morning before work and still told me I was the most beautiful person he'd ever known. Not because of how I looked, but because of how I walked through fire and came out with a heart that still knew how to love. By the time Natural You reached its series of funding round and was valued at over $50 million, the press started asking for interviews again. They wanted to know my secret, the algorithms, the branding, the origin story. And I told them, my story doesn't have a fairy tale ending. It's not about revenge. It's not about some perfect, golden transformation. It's about the quiet victory of self-respect. About choosing truth over approval, peace over perfection. And every time they printed my words, every time my real face appeared in a feature without retouching, without filters, I imagined a young girl somewhere, curled up in her room, acne blooming across her cheeks, scrolling through stories trying to find someone who looked like her. And there I was, not flawless, but free. The world didn't end when I walked away from my family. It began. Not all endings are wrapped in gold ribbon and grand reconciliation. Some are quiet. Some look like small apartments, soft smiles, steady work, and a name you chose for yourself. Not a happy ending, maybe, but a true one. And for me, that was more than enough. Spring returned to Cambridge like a whisper. Soft green creeping into the trees, rain pooling quietly on the edges of cobblestone streets. I walked those streets with lighter steps than I'd ever known, my head high, my name intact. I had once believed that to be loved, I needed to be rewritten, smoothed, slimmed, silenced. But the girl who stood in front of those mirrors was long gone. I was Harper Wilson now, and I had built a life not in spite of my scars, but because of them. Naturally, you grew faster than any of us expected. We hired 20 new staff members that spring. A second office opened in Chicago. Our first international partnership was signed. I was invited to speak at a global summit on digital wellness in Geneva. One day, Alicia walked into my office holding her phone up like a trophy. "You need to see this." It was a message from a teenage girl in Jakarta. She had severe eczema, had been bullied her entire school life, had stopped looking in mirrors. She downloaded the app, tracked her flare-ups, and finally went to a dermatologist armed with confidence and data. She ended the message with, "I used to feel like a mistake. Now I feel like a system learning how to function. Thank you for creating something that didn't tell me to hide. Thank you for seeing me." I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because it was too sacred for tears. Thomas proposed to me in the simplest, kindest way. We were on the balcony at sunset, eating takeout, our laptops open but forgotten. "I want to build a life with you," he said. "Not a perfect one, just a real one." I said yes, not because I needed completion, but because I wanted someone beside me who knew my full story and never once asked me to change it. I returned to Charleston only once after the reunion, not to visit my parents, not to walk the old streets where I once hid my face in oversized sweaters and ducked behind parked cars to avoid whispers, but to speak at a local youth conference. They asked me to talk about transformation. Instead, I talked about truth. I wore no makeup, a simple navy dress, my hair pulled back with a silver pin. After the talk, a girl no older than 15 approached me. Her skin was marked with the same patterns I once prayed to erase. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me like she was still deciding if I was real. Then she said, quietly, "I didn't think someone like me could stand up there and sound like that." I placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You already do," I said. When the last box of my past was finally unpacked, old journals, the hard drive from that battered laptop, even the corset dress I had secretly kept, I didn't cry. I folded the dress gently and donated it to a local shelter. I uploaded the last of my blog archives to the Natural You Resource Center under a new series titled The Girl Who Coded in the Dark. And then I closed the door, not out of fear, not out of anger, but because some chapters deserve an ending. Now, when people ask me who I am, I don't start with titles. Not CEO, not founder, not top of my class. I say, I'm the girl who walked away from the house that tried to bury her, who said no when the world demanded silence, who chose her face, her voice, her name, and never gave them back. And I didn't just survive. I became the story I once needed to read, the girl who never looked back, and never needed to.